Is it okay now?
Yeah, looking good.
Okay. So just I want to see it is live or not. Is it live now?
Yes, sir, it is live right now.
Okay, it is showing now live.
Yes.
Okay. So, in fact, this is a very important thing when you talk about diaspora, and many of you are talking. I could hear that degree, this, that, and all. But when you talk about knowledge society, actually knowledge is important. Today we are dispersed. Manish is in Mumbai, Abha is in Bhubaneswar. I think somebody, Anu, and all of you are dispersed. But the power of information technology and knowledge, this is called knowledge society, where in fact knowledge society was there before also. But since ancient time, people share knowledge. There are musicians, there are various groups which they share knowledge. Even among you may find in Nalanda and all university platforms, even the variety of occupational, professional groups, they were there. So their knowledge society, you can say. But the globalization and information technology brought different dimension to this. It has no boundary now. We are all, even student of different, we are from different place and sharing this. And today I'll be talking about, actually, when you talk about diaspora and knowledge and technology transfer and trade, I'll be talking about how these three are interrelated: globalization, diaspora, knowledge society, trade. All these are interrelated. Nothing is new, but all are interrelated in the global scale now. So when we talk about globalization and capitalism, all of you know, I also taught in some of my earlier class, this big way to see global society, all nation states are interconnected, not in a equal term, but in unequal term, we see. Because the powerful countries like nations like USA, China, they're controlling the world, in a different way. When you come, talk about trade, both China and India, they are controlling now large, number of, trade and their linkage with other countries. It is not equal. Today we talk about Sri Lanka's collapse, blaming to China. Somebody says, some countries blaming to USA. This is nothing but, it's a power game. You try to subjugate others, exploit their resources, not just raw material, but finance, human resource also. And this is a global scale happening. When you talk about world system theory, actually there are several core and periphery. When you talk about, Europe was controlling an entire world during colonial time. Now you have USA, then China, then some other countries are also emerging. So these are all kinds of system where each country dominates some area, each nation, and they exploit their all resources, including capital, human resource, raw material. We talk about petrol, politics related to petrol, why there is attack on Iran and all. So that is resource. We also talk about H1B visa, so many visas, and pulling the talent from various countries. It's very important to understand there is nothing big favor we are getting. Big country, we are actually investing. One, you just imagine many of our people who are leaving the country, after spending huge money, personal money plus government money, one person, even when you find a university student or IIT or IIM student, one student must have spent several, close to 1 crore, and they're going to other country and directly serving there. The country which is using them, they don't pay anything. Okay, just they pay the salary. So this is a brain drain phenomenon, which was very much, in debate and controversy also in 1970s, especially. If you read the literature in India, Jagdish Bhagavati and all there, and many other countries, even China also stopped the tax also. Their own people who are going out as brain drain, tax. But that didn't work. Even in India also, it didn't work. But that was a phase where IT was not very vibrant. So once a person goes, suppose Manish leaves this country, we don't get any benefit of Manish. But today's scenario has changed. Manish can teach, I can teach anywhere. I can give my expertise also because knowledge became more important. And that is how diaspora is playing very important role in the latter half, especially 90s onwards. When IT came, we find the new concept coming like brain chain, brain network. Even that during 90s, we found this kind of concept coming because before that it was one sided. Okay, once you lose the person human resource, it is a one sided. No country doesn't get benefit. But after 90s, there is a different type of, and you can find visible changes, especially I'll give example of India and China and many other countries which could utilize this brain very well. India to some extent in IT sector, healthcare, I'll give example. So these skills and capitals are very important and diaspora plays a very important role. When you talk about diaspora, we say human being, you can, if a raw material goes, it has no memory. If somebody, if an animal goes to another country, it has no memory as such to come back, you know. But when human being goes, it carries many things with it. Memory, skills, capital, and what not. It carries everything. It's experience. So that actually in a new place further enriches. And because of memory and kind of social cultural affinity with home country, these skills and capital knowledge become very important if it can be used in a reverse way. So that's why this concept came for brain gain or brain change. Okay, how it happens? Because as you know, you are all familiar. Many of you have also near and dear abroad. You see their relation. Not always all are bad, but if 30% of them actually really do some, development work, it can change the scenario. We have so many university. IIT Delhi has, Kharagpur has. I was browsing their website. Many of their alumni network were worldwide actually, and somebody build hostels, somebody gives so many infrastructural facilities, and this is the beauty of alumni network, diaspora network. Okay, then hometown association back home, mainly you can find in Punjab and many Kerala also and Andhra Pradesh also. Back home there are associations which are collaborating with the diasporic association and lots of development work is happening. Okay, in Gujarat and so many cases are available. I think some of you should do project on this also. Then professional network. There are American, Association of Physician of Indian origin. Then so many other associations like Silicon Valley Association, NRI Entrepreneurs Association. If you browse website, you'll find all this. Even same with Chinese, Philippines, and all you find. So these are all emerging network, which actually creating a different kind of scenario where you find the home countries are now better positioned to utilize this kind of brain. So so this is what I say knowledge society. When we say it has no physical barrier. Earlier we were saying when BPO sector came, earlier we were saying brain drain. Now even our own brain within India is not controlled by Indian state, because through BPO sector and many other call centers and all, our people are 24 hours working for another company, another country. So geographical boundary is gone so far as skill, knowledge, expertise is concerned. So this is what knowledge society and revolution in IT gives to the world. And diaspora across the world that once considered brain drain become an asset. So that asset again, it depends upon how you utilize. Even if you have, we say that even if you have gold, if you don't know value, what is the use? Same with every resource, human resource and everything. If you don't know how to use, there is no use. So that is why you find there is a difference between China, India, other countries. Many countries have more proportionately more diaspora than India and China, but they don't have many framework to use them. Many countries they don't know how to use them. Sometimes they have very antagonistic relation with diaspora also. So I already told knowledge is very important actually in any field, even in agriculture. This physical labor, physical hard labor, this is a you can replace actually. You can replace machine with a human being. Okay, but knowledge is important. Even for a farmer, if you all of you know, many of this farming community, India's production is increasing in agriculture, but people are leaving agriculture also. You don't need so many people working on agriculture now compared to 20 years back, because knowledge driven economy. Knowledge can use a machine and replace 50 people from industry and from agriculture. So this is knowledge driven. Okay. So that is how you find, knowledge based society, knowledge based economy, knowledge based everything, education, all are coming up, and knowledge become itself is a commodity. So this is the hallmark of contemporary society, and it is important for everything, even in politics also. We all say today changing narratives. Narratives is what? Knowledge. You call information war. It is what? Knowledge. You all call about also kind of brainwashing and all. So this is what knowledge in bad way or good way. Knowledge is creating impact. Okay. So this is a hallmark of knowledge society. And diaspora, when you talk about, it is actually when you talk about diaspora and its relation with knowledge network and all, it is sometimes you cannot quantify, because there are many multiple ways to evaluate. For example, I I have relationship with my near and dear in America, USA and all. Many of you have. So it is not necessarily they will give some industry this or you. Sometimes you are more resourceful than them also. In the globalized society, we should not think people who are out of India, they are more resourceful than us. Sometimes we are more resourceful than them also. So we exchange idea, we exchange network, we exchange financial capital. That's how the diaspora network helps. In fact, if you see China, almost now the reverse brain drains are happening more. Many people are going out of China, which is encouraged by Chinese government, and they are also equally encouraging to come back. So these are because always, when you go to other country, learn new skills, learn in multicultural, setup, it has a different impact. That's why when you are exposed to multicultural society, you also bring new information. Like you globalize your corporate through collaboration. That is what I'll give example about Chinese corporation. Many of their diaspora link help them the home industry to grow global. Same way in India also. because of diaspora network. Small industry become global industry. You see the, today, if you see Oyo and Make My Trip and all, they're a global platform now. You go to any country, Oyo is there. Okay, hotel and every. So these are going global, and this is possible with partly diaspora network and other network. So when we talk about knowledge economy, diaspora plays a big facilitator. And I'll also give example. I already gave example through alumni network, through many network it happens. And going global is not easy actually. If you don't know the language, even a worker cannot go to other country. Forget about industry. So you need many level of socio-cultural advocacy and every level, and that is where diaspora is playing important role. If you see the kind of growth of Indian corporate also, many are actually going to diaspora countries. Okay, where diaspora is there facilitating. Okay, so that is what happening. You can find the global Indian industries how they are spreading also. There is a diaspora angle to that. Okay, and that is why I'm saying when we talk about knowledge economy, it is very important to understand human resource and how many countries actually creating impact on this by investing in research and development, and that for that you need worker, and American society actually built on this immigrant contribution. Everybody today who are saying we should not allow immigrant, they were immigrant also 10 years back, 20 years back. Same with the UK. Rishi Sunak was immigrant from Africa, Indian origin. But today they are fighting, they don't want immigrant. So this is the history of, many countries are actually prosperous today because of immigrant. And this is what, every sector you see, every health sector, IT sector and all, you go to Silicon Valley, 70% are immigrants. I gave example. Okay. So like that, this is the kind of wherever you find the countries are spending more on R&D, they're attracting human resource because you need human brain to do research. USA is the largest, knowledge-driven economy. It is attracting maximum number of people across the world, especially high skilled. Then China also attracting, but mostly it is their own diaspora. Because China, you cannot without Chinese language, very difficult. But today, if you see all the big corporates, they have presence in China. So also China has presence in all over the world. Okay, Japan, Germany, if you see last 10 years, especially the migrants are increasing, especially high skilled. Okay, South Korea, France. So these are all they're investing a lot of uh, money on research and development. If you see these countries, which is the big budget, especially USA and here China, they're spending huge amount of money on research and development, and this is what drives the high skilled migration from other countries to go these countries. And already I explained earlier also, this is the receiving country, destination country, these are the sending countries. But sometimes if you see, like China, it is receiving, sending almost same proportionate. Okay, because the condition of China is very good for innovation and development, for entrepreneurship. So there is a to and fro almost equal proportion now. Okay, but India, it is more going out, coming very less coming in. Okay, Mexico also same, and so many. You also know top. In fact, Apple. We talk about who was that person in Apple? who was very famous
From where, sir?
in Apple, who invented many, Apple, we talk about him now. In the Apple, one of the
Hint,
top.
can you give hint which country or prospect you are talking about?
No, I'm saying in Apple, one of the top innovator was there who died, in cancer. He's from
Steve
Syria.
Jobs.
Steve
No.
Jobs. Steve Jobs. So like that, I'm saying what is my point? Many of these top corporates.
He was from Syria. He migrated from Syria to USA.
Yes, he's from
First generation. First
Yes.
generation.
Yes, his father came. His father came. So
Means
like
his father,
that,
then after that he came. Okay.
yes. So like that, if you see all these countries, they have special provision to attract high speed, migrants. H-1B visa, especially from USA, German has, I explained in my talk. So these are all attracting the people and they're using them in their R&D department. You see the number of people from India going, and this is increasing also. Okay, this year I forgot to mention this year is highest number also. Number of students going to USA has increased now. Okay, and this is what I, in a nutshell, I'm saying. The knowledge economy actually invite lots of migrants to, because that is the real investment. They do research, they do innovation, they attract other raw material, capital, everything. Human being is the prime center of everything. That's why many countries are, attracting, and that is why you find the center of excellence in all these countries, and there is a war for hunting talent that is also going on, which we don't know, but in the garb of everything happening, there is a talent, hunting war happening across the globe. And if you see the new policies of German, especially it is Germany is a little bit aggressive now in recent time. Okay, so all this I want to say that if you talk about Indian diaspora, I'll give two examples which are comparable actually. Okay, one is Indian diaspora, another is Chinese diaspora. Okay, within that I'll talk in Indian diaspora especially. If see the history, it can be broadly, so far as knowledge, trade, and all concerned, it can be broadly divided into four phases. Okay, when you talk about trade diaspora was there before even colonial time. Okay, we all know Sindhis, Gujaratis, even Chettiars, they have gone to Burma, and even we learned history. People from Orissa and all, they have gone to Sri Lanka, Malaya, and all this, whatever Burma and all this. Okay, Sumatra, there was boat, going. So Gujarat also, East Africa and all, will talk in East Africa, which traders of East Africa, West Africa, all this will talk in latter. So there was a trade diaspora, which actually is very ancient, almost 6th century, 7th century on to Mughal time. When Britishers came, they destroyed because they were the exporting cloths and masalas and very means gems and jewels, all these things. So when British came, they devastated all these things and they established their own trade. But till Mughal time, you find Gujarat is going to, West Africa, even Central Asia, you find Indian traders, moneylenders. There is a big, very beautiful book, Indian moneylenders you can find in Ukraine, okay, Kyrgyzstan and all this. And you find even Burma, Chettiars in Tamil Chettiars in Burma and all. So there was a trade diaspora from India, which was very, very much intact, there are beautiful story on them also, how they go in sea route 3 months, 4 months, and they keep selling in one place one thing, then they take another product from there and go to another country Then the rotation, through, rotation 4 months, 6 months, 1 year, it comes. And that is a very globalized way. They carry masala from India to Malaya, from Malaya to another thing. So like that it go. Then next one is colonial migration. So trade diaspora was pre-British mostly. Colonial diaspora was coolie type migration. Okay, coolie type, but this is the large number, almost 10 to 12 million people, gone during that time. And this diaspora we don't talk much because it has not much, now they are very powerful. Like people coming from, those countries and becoming vice president of USA, Kamala Harris, like contesting in UK. Recently, there, the old colonial diaspora is coming up very, very vibrant way, So, but they are not resourceful for a long time and they lost in touch with India. So we don't talk in the context of trade and building. So that is the different thing. Then we talk brain drain type of migration after independence, especially in 60s, 70s. Many have gone, many have come back, and they created impact. We talk about MS Swaminathan, we talk about Sam Petroda. They have gone abroad, and when they came back, they also created impact. Green Revolution was the architect of Green Revolution was MS Swaminathan. Telecom Revolution, Sam Pitroda. So like that, even George, the White Revolution, Milk Revolution, I think he also came from abroad. George Kurian and all this. So this the brain diaspora actually is very important for India, and it is not stopped actually. It is increasing even today. But today's scenario is different. Then we have another unskilled and semi-skilled migration. So if you see this four pattern, Indian people have gone abroad, and we will be talking about brain drain and trade today. These two diaspora. Okay. And today if you see Indians in global, trade, technology driven industry, you almost see who's who. Okay. All top industry, you find Indians now or Chinese now. You can see some figures, Satya Nadella and all these people. And all these are very top industry, Alphabet, Microsoft, IBM, Twitter, all this. So this is why I'm saying this brain drain, whatever we thought yesterday, today, these are one of the leading investor in India. You find Microsoft also opening many places in India, and same with many of this, because there is a brain network happening. You all know the story of 90s IT revolution. This is also because of Silicon Valley, industrialists, especially Vinod Dham, then so many other, Sabir Bhatia, so many, they actually uh, sponsored and they gave, new startups in Bangalore and Hyderabad, and that phenomenally grown over time. So these people, this today we see this, many of them, they have done directly, indirectly the same thing. Okay. So this is what the beauty of brain drain yesterday and today's brain drain because of human network. Okay, I'll talk about two sectors especially, how both of these grown with a diaspora support. One is IT sector, another is healthcare sector. Healthcare sector, I have done research. IT, I got examples. So when you talk about IT sector, you see it was India was the one of the front runner when telecom revolution happened nowhere in the world, only in USA and some developed country. India took the lead actually in 90s, just before 90s. During I think Prime Minister was Rajiv Gandhi and Sam Pitroda. That time, though there was so many up to village level we find, telecom, infrastructure, and that is very important because many of you don't know those time we are all using internet through phone and internet through where, okay, but that infrastructure was very important. After that, fiber optics and all this came, wireless and all this, but initial breakthrough because of this telephone lines. Okay, so that was in 80s, 90s was done by again one diaspora person, Sam Pichura. Then you find the Silicon Valley when it was very much, vibrant in 90s. You find its impact in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and uh, Gurgaon and all this. And many of the leading software, companies today, Wipro and Infosys and all, many of them they had collaboration. Many of them came back also, okay, and the startup happened. You read their story, they brought everything, technology, computer they purchased from USA and they came, okay. I think the Infosys story, 3 computers they started, okay, with a few rooms they started. They didn't know about how it will evolve. But today Infosys has one of the biggest recruiter, in UK and all. So they have gone global, okay, because they captured the initial breakthrough before even China could wake up, okay. If you see 90s to 2000, India was leading better than China, especially in software. So these are all, if you see, because of diasporic connection. So NRI startup, there are now, if you see, there are portals which facilitate the new startup in India. You can collaborate with diaspora and see how you can uh, build a startup within India. So these are portals, and if you go to Silicon Valley, there are Vinod Dham and all. They are very much linked with the Indian startups. I don't know the present story, but they were the 90s, 2000, even I think till today they are one of the biggest, supporter of so IT startups. Okay. Then come to healthcare. If you see, nobody thought, 90s only government hospitals were there. Okay. Not many private, only individual, maybe few. But corporatization of hospital happened in 90s. And one of the leading hospital was Apollo, if you remember. Okay, Pratap Reddy, if you know the history, he came from USA. Then even Hyderabad, other big corporates like LV Prasad, the institute. Then it was founded by Gulapuli Nageshwar Rao. Even today, if you see big hospital like, Rockland, Fortis and all, Medanta, all these are done. Any hospital, top hospital you take in India, invariably it will be from coming, brain gain, you can say, but the diaspora contribution. Okay, many have come back from abroad, many come with technology, many come with finance, philanthropic. If you go to LV Prasad Eye Institute, you find lots of donors also from Africa, from USA, from others. Lots of technological collaboration. If you go to website, know, through collaboration. Okay, and now that is one of the leading eye institute in the world. Okay, they have in African countries also. Okay, Apollo has in other country also. Sri Lanka, I think they have. Gulf countries they have also. So these are all now going global in hospitality sector, and they have started with diaspora support. Okay, now coming to diaspora trade. Okay, this is also very important, and if you see. Diaspora trade today is different. As I mentioned, knowledge society trade also needs to have international support, and diaspora is one of them. Okay, diaspora play intermediary or facilitator of business. Okay, if you see many of these Indian people going global or diaspora coming India, diaspora is the intermediate. They play role of lobby group. They play role of influencing policy. You see the even OCI card is what? If you read the OCI card, it is also facilitating the people coming India purchasing, various, on lease land and investing. So they get equal support in terms of setting business like any other Indians within India. Okay, so these are all because of diasporic, linkages. Again, if we see, it is a when you talk about trade, it is a two-way actually. One side is coming in, other side is going out, depending upon how you facilitate. In China, many are coming. Both way it is happening. In India also, both way it's coming. Okay. Now Indians are investing in Mauritius and other places. You find Indian education like Amity, so many educational institutes going abroad also. Okay. So they are settling their branches abroad. Diaspora also work as a consumer, okay, and that creates lots of trade in food, in dress, in culture. Ethnic products also create lots of because they have attachment. I have gone to few countries where Indian products are sold in 3 times costly than India, 4 times. Okay, you find Amurtanjam in Hong Kong. Okay, you find some kinds of idli, vada and dosa masalas, pickle, you find Indian pickles. So very because they are very much attached to the taste of India, the culture of India. So this trade in this area is very much in demand. Okay, so yoga also and all this they're very much in demand. So when you talk about Indian diaspora trade, I already gave example. In West Asia, there is a long trade relation. Gujarat is in Africa, especially Zanzibar and all. Central Asia, the Indians have gone. Then contemporary time, you find lots of trade in cultural product and IT and other things. Two of this area which you find, cultural base like India, little India, you find Chinatown. They are all cultural base. Okay, you have some Chinese population or Indian population there, and these are all catering care to their needs. Then Chinese diaspora, I'll talk. Indian diaspora, hope you got some idea. When you talk about Chinese diaspora, actually Chinese, the geography is different compared to Indian diaspora. Indian diaspora is global, Chinese diaspora is also global. But Chinese diaspora is mostly spread within their country. Large 50%, 70% of Chinese diaspora is there itself, near to the China. They are in, Singapore, they are in Taiwan, they are in Malaysia, they are in Vietnam, all these countries. And this is the one of the leading trade zone if you see. If you see these countries are emerging after 90s and they have done tremendous, progress in trade and business. Okay, so that is because of Chinese diaspora, you can say. Okay, especially Asian countries. And two of this important concept you should understand in the context of Chinese diaspora, that is bamboo network, which is a diasporic network, or P. This is also similar to Chinese, family ties. This is also a kind of bamboo network. Okay, so diasporic network. These two are very important. Which is a ethnic, family and community network, which facilitated all kinds of information sharing, which has cultural, political, education, and all financial. So that's why they bypass, the many legal and institutional processes. When you compare, I have written one article about comparing China and India. The speed of Chinese investment cycle is, very much faster compared to any other business, even Japanese also. and other countries because of this cooperative or bamboo network. If I and Manish we agree, both of us brother or relatives, we don't need bank or Supreme Court or all this. We just word of mouth. We have trust on each other, and today we just agree. Tomorrow we start our business or investment, and day after tomorrow we produce the things. But if we don't agree, Manish and me, we are not, having trust of that level, then we go through various channels. We do legal procedure, we go through bank, we get loan, we go to government of that place. So it takes years, in India, we must be seeing investment announcement to investment happening. Sometimes it is not happening, and sometimes it takes years. That is not the case of with China especially. They do in a lightning speed, and that is because of this bamboo network and cooperative, which are very much a diasporic network with familiar network. They go global very fast, and that's how you find today, like till 90s, India was a big trader in African countries. But today Chinese have outsmarted and Indians are coming down actually because they have gone very fast. One Chinese goes to one country, he brings many Chinese, and they outsmart every very fast. They bring the banking sector, government also facilitate. I'll talk about how they manage their migration and they facilitate business. You go to any country, I think many of you, Manish, and many of you have gone. You see Chinese bank everywhere, wherever Chinese population is there. Chinese support system is everywhere. You don't find same level of support system for Indian migrants. Okay, you can purchase land. Chinese government will give loan without any interest. That is what is happening in Australia and all. They have purchased land in Australia now, and many Canada and all, and they're almost permanently settled. And that is creating a base for a Chinese investor. And I was reading, if Australia is today developed, it's because of Chinese. If the Chinese come back, Australia will become developed country. They will not be considered as developed countries. And I'll give example of many countries, especially now. Okay. If you see the Chinese diaspora, they have been going global very fast, and China is number one country of origin for international student migration. In United States, they are also number one in Australia and other countries. Okay, so this is how they are sending their student and learning. Then they are also inviting them to the country. Okay, so through return migration, they are facilitating. Okay, so this is how they are promoting innovation and knowledge sharing globally. Chinese have gone out and they're coming back, and that's how network is very strong, and that is facilitating all this knowledge economy in China at home, and also facilitating the Chinese people going global. Okay, if you see today, China is number one traders. Even they outsmart the USA. Okay, in manufacturing in many areas, overall China is number one today. Then come USA, then come Germany. So these trade facilities are done because of Chinese diaspora. I'll come that also there also how they have been doing with Chinese diaspora. Okay, with Asian countries especially, there okay, 70% of Chinese they are migrated to Asian countries: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. If you see their population percentage and their size of GDP, Chinese holding corporate and economic capital in those countries, you actually will be surprised. In Thailand, Chinese control 60% of their GDP. You see, okay? Indonesia, they control 70%. That's why there will be sometimes you find anti-Chinese sentiment in many of these countries. And because their economy is controlled by them. Philippines, they are controlling 70% of their economy. Ethnic Chinese. Okay. Ethnic Chinese may not necessarily from mainland China. They can be from Malaysia. They can be ethnic Chinese. They can be from Chinese, Taiwan. They can be from Hong Kong, anywhere. Malaysia, they control 50% of their GDP. Today, you find all the big buildings, big business are all Chinese. Okay, even the finance minister of today, I think Chinese. So they control their economy. Singapore, 90% of GDP are controlled by Chinese. Okay, this is from source I gave. You can see from that PPT. Okay, then if you see the trade and partner with China, USA, you just see the graph. Chinese are controlling maximum trade in all sectors, almost. Okay, and China's trade with Southeast Asia, you see, they're also controlling huge proportion with their Southeast Asia partner. Okay, why they're successful? As I mentioned, because of diaspora network, bamboo network, and all this. Okay, Chinese, they have entrepreneurial. Actually, when you compare to Chinese diaspora with Indian diaspora, Chinese diaspora was much more entrepreneurial from the beginning. You know, even before Chinese got independence, you find Chinese entrepreneurial network is very huge. So that is how they have already utilized their existing strength of entrepreneurial network, and they became very quickly successful globally. Okay, and because of their Confucian culture, which unique, Confucian culture, Chinese fast, their own culture is fast. Instead of many Chinese are hostile to China, but when the culture come, they are all united. Even in Malaysia, you find many of these Chinese, they came to Malaysia because of prosecution during communist rule. As a nation, they don't like, but as a culture, they like, because they are all united because of culture. That is how they utilize that cultural component, bamboo network, and they prosper. So this is where we can compare actually, where very minuscule Indians are using the family network, community network like Gujarat. This, the whole Chinese diaspora using that same network, community network, and they are doing very good in trade and business. And that is how you find lots of difference when you compare to China with India. Okay, and this is what there. As I mentioned, this network actually trust-based network facilitating not just speed but also the kind of capturing the advantage. Like China became manufacturing hub. Manufacturing, the kind of support we require, the trust require, government policy require, international network is required. That all is in advantage of China. Okay, so this is where you can compare both, and I'll stop here because I already crossed the time. But there are some reference also you can see. I have more reference in the study material. You can see this, and you can read out some of this. If there are any quick question, I can answer because Dibra is there, I think. Dibra is there. If there are any quick question, I can answer before I hand over to Dibra. Anybody want to ask question? No? Yes, Dibya is here. Dibya, there is no question. I'll pass on to you. Let me introduce Dibya. I'll close this first. And
Previous lecture is finished, sir. This is a new lecture, right?
this will be a new lecture because no question I found. So now we can.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. But if there are questions, we have WhatsApp group, you can always ask. Okay. So Dr. Divya Balan is an assistant professor in Flame University, and she has been working on diaspora since last 15 years from her PhD and after that, and she has been regularly publishing newspaper articles, research papers, and engaged in various conversation, debates on migration and diaspora. She is affiliated with the GRFTT and other organizations globally, and also she has been very much, proactive in the current debate on diaspora and migration. So I'll give brief introduction. You will know her profile from internet. So with this brief introduction, Divya, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Let me share my screen. Sir, is this visible?
It's coming. It's coming. Yes, it's visible. Yes.
It's visible. Okay. And I'm properly audible as well.
Yes, yes, audible properly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for this invitation to speak with all of you. It's a real honor. I'll be today talking about social costs and benefits of migration, which is Unit 8 of Migration and Diaspora Theory and Methodology course. In this talk, basically, I would like to point something which usually is missing in the discourses on migration in the academic sphere as well as in the public sphere conversations. The focus is mostly India because my own studies, my own research largely centers in the migrant communities of India. To give a brief overview of what I have done in the past, my doctoral thesis was on Indian diaspora in Britain, after which I started working on Gulf migrants from India with a focus on Kerala. I'm basically from Kerala. So, because of the familiarity, I do conduct qualitative, and my methodology is largely qualitative. So, it's mostly interviews and meeting migrants, returnees. So even when I speak to all of you, most of the instances, examples that I'm going to explain is basically from my own interactions with migrant community members and return migrants. I don't think I have to explain what migration is since you are almost at Unit 8 of this particular course. However, I just wanted to mention that in this particular conversation, I'll be focusing on international migration. Even though the focus is more on international migration, we could see that several of the social costs and benefits of migration are actually applicable to in the case of internal migration or within country migration, interstate migration as we call it in India, and as well as post migration or refugee movements. So wherever I could include that, the insights I'll be adding on, but largely the focus is on international migration. And we know that migration of whichever form, whether it's international migration, whether it's within the country, whether it's forced migration, it's an ever-growing phenomenon. It started since time immemorial. There was, we all know that even this earth is populated by various phases of series of migration starting from out of the Africa migration, as the theory says. So migration is always there. It's going to be there forever is what, at least someone who is studying migration, I could see that it is going to, and the intensity of migration is going to be ever increased, even in this century and the coming centuries as well. But what we as students students, of researchers, of social scientists of migration, we have to, or we should be focusing on the implications of migration. And we all know that there are positive impacts of migration, negative impacts of migration, and it's not just economic impacts, but also there are developmental consequences of migration. There are social, political, cultural, even identity related issues associated with migration, demographic implications of migration, and often we don't really look at the environmental implications. However, we could see that especially in the context of climate change and all the rest of the conversations associated with it, we know that even environmental implications are something which we have to take into consideration when we look at migration as a whole. And all of these implications, its benefits and its whatever cost can be visible in both origin countries or sending countries, as we say, home countries, as we say, as well as in the destination host countries. So it's a it's a phenomena which is largely something which is at different stages of our of the development of migration studies as a discipline has dealt with. And we know that something which I'm going to mention in this particular slide is well aware. We are all aware of the benefits of migration, especially for the sending country. We know that the money that migrants send back to us, the remittances as we call it, that leads to poverty reduction, eradication, improved health and educational outcomes out of the money that these migrant communities are sending home. We know that contribute to overall economic development of the country. I mean, as I mentioned, since my current study is on Gulf migrants from Kerala. Kerala as a state, let me sort of give you an instance. Kerala as a state, in fact, have 5 international airports, number of hospitals. The health medical system in this particular state of India is so advanced that even people from Gulf countries, and I'll come to that, why Arabs come to Kerala for their treatment. There is a lot of health as well as educational institutions in this particular state. And this particular trend started of people investing in health and education. It started somewhere around late 70s, 80s, which is when from the Gulf countries, migrants of Kerala state started sending money from. So, even the development of, or in the state, we call it Kerala model development, which we could see that the biggest contributor to that model of development is actually the migrant communities. And among the migrant communities of Kerala, those who are in the Gulf countries, rather than those who are in the Western European countries, like for instance, Canada, US, more than them, it's the GCC country migrants in the state who are investing and contributing to the economy. So you could see that, and similarly, we could see that the development in, say, for instance, Punjab or Gujarat, how much migrants are contributing. When we look at the recent wave of phase of migration from India to other countries, we could see that UP, Bihar, some of the other South Indian states like, say, Telangana, the numbers are increasing. Many people from these states are going out, and you could see, and recently I have traveled to Bihar, to Patna, and I could see that many new constructions, it could be, I really didn't get it, whether they are houses or business establishments like shops, but I could see many constructions that's happening, construction of building that's happening, on the roadside. which I, you know what, and then incidentally I stopped at one place where I asked the workers, like, you know, what is it that you are constructing? And incidentally, the owner of the land was there, and he was saying that his son is in Gulf, in Abu Dhabi, if I remember correctly, and he is regularly sending money. So they bought this land and building a small stationery shop there for this father, apparently. So, you know, you could see that, and immediately I could connect it with Kerala, because this is how the first phase of migration from Kerala also, you know, slowly the shops started coming up, medical institutions started coming up, schools, especially English medium schools, private schools started coming up in Kerala. You know, from 2 airports to 5 airports. So I immediately could think of you know, Patna or Bihar, or the newest entrance in the migration corridor. Similar sort of you know, developmental activities happening. So, you know, we know that it's a known fact, it's a proved fact that migration contributes to sending country. There is no doubt about it. Then coming to you know, the migrants themselves and their families. You know, the biggest advantage of migration or benefit of migration is, you know, they're getting better household income. And through that income, again, as remittances, through that income, the improvement in the quality of life, they're getting better living conditions. Or, you know, when we look at the migrants themselves, we could see that their skill is developing. When somebody, say for instance, a driver from India go to, or even a medical professional, a nurse or doctor go to, you know, a foreign country for work, they get used to, they get that exposure of advanced medical instruments, for instance, the technology, for instance. So their skill, this is actually, migration is also an upskilling phenomenon. So the migrants are, even the low skilled workers are, you know, actually upskilling in the process of migration. Recently, I mean, right now I'm doing my field work, and this field work is basically on return migration. Many migrants from the Gulf countries have returned back to India due to COVID. As in, you know, they lost their job. Some of the companies asked them to resign instead of terminating them. Also, you know, nationalization policies are in full swing in the Gulf countries. Arabization programs in Saudi Arabia, it's called Nitakat. So they are preferring, the Gulf countries are preferring Arab nationals for several sectors of work in GCC countries right now. So many people have left the job by resigning, or some people were terminated by the company during the COVID, saying that, you know, the company is in a very economically very bad shape and you have to leave, etc., etc., the conversation. So many people have come back. And you know, past week I was having this conversation, this interview with one of the return migrant, a returnee. And I asked this person about, you know, what he was in Gulf for 24 long years. 25th year is when he came back. He came back in the second phase of COVID. That's when he came back. So I asked him, what you have learned from Gulf? And immediately he said that it's the skill. Because, you know, he said that I haven't used the machines that I have operated when in Gulf while he was in Kerala before migrating. He was in the same industry, but when he went to Gulf, he started using most advanced you know, techniques as well as machinery. So he said that my skill has improved, but right now when I'm back, I don't know what to do. So there is an element of uncertainty for this person who is back post-COVID. But however, he said that it's a skill. And also, interestingly, this person said that I'm the exposure. So I asked him, what sort of exposure are you talking about? He said, I have many friends from not just from India, and he mentioned that Punjabis and Gujaratis and Tamilians and Telugu people, and he said not just Indians that I was having friends while I was in Gulf, but also Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Filipinos, Palestinians, and he was going on, and he said I got such exposure and I could now speak at least 3-4 languages. So the point I'm trying to make is migration is not just an economic act, it's a social phenomenon. And throughout the process, migrants himself, other than the money he is saving and remitting back to home, processes like upskilling is happening. Processes like international exposure that's happening to him. So it's a very and it's all depends on your perspective, your approach, how you look at migration. So we can, if we have a positive approach to migration, considering migration as a beneficial process for people involved and the families involved and the countries involved, then we could really see that upskilling is happening, exposure is happening. The person who is working in a foreign country would obviously be having more broader worldview when we have that conversations with migrants. And throughout my interviews with them, I always was excited to see how much they know about West Asian politics, the whole of, more than even an international relations student, because they are living in that place and they have that exposure. So the exposure is something which we don't really talk about in academia. So in that sense, again, that's something which I think we should consider as benefits of migration. In the case of receiving countries, this is slightly sort of like always a point of controversy. It's a very sensitive conversation many a times, how whether receiving countries are benefited out of migration, or it's whether migration is a problem for these receiving countries. It depends a lot on the politics. It depends a lot on the government in power. We have seen that for instance, in the case of United States of America during the Donald Trump's time, migration was considered as a negative implication on US, and there were bans on migrants going in and etc. Whereas we thought Biden's the current regime would be different. So it depends a lot on, or maybe we can also think about the case of Germany, where when Merkel was the chancellor, Germany was the country who wholeheartedly welcomed, for instance, refugees from Syria, and largely, welcoming to the migrants, whether it's voluntary migrants or forced migrants. So a lot depends on, when we talk about receiving countries or destination countries, a lot depends on the politics, public discourses, and the government in power in those countries. Again, incidentally, what is coming to my mind is about the recent Russia-Ukraine war, and Ukrainians migrating to the European countries, Poland, etc., those countries which Ukraine is having borders. You could see that Poland and the rest of the European countries are very much welcoming these Ukrainian refugees. Whereas, and even you could see that there is a differential sort of treatment that's going on when they wholeheartedly welcoming Ukrainian nationals, whereas Africans in Ukraine trying to cross to European Union countries were stopped and searched, and they had to go through a different, or I would say differential structure and system of entry. So it depends a lot. And then also maybe we can connect this same conversation of Ukrainians getting a warm welcome in European Union countries in comparison to how it was for the Syrians, how it was for the African refugees, especially North African refugees, or even Afghans. So we can draw comparisons, and we could see that a lot depends on the political regime of the destination countries. However, something which we can't really deny, or again, it's an undisputed fact that whatever be the political narrative regarding migrants coming in, or the security narrative around migrants being many a times projected as a security threat or whatever, especially post 9/11, that conversation we have seen. So whatever be the conversation, we could see that migrants are plays a major role. They play a major role in sustaining economic growth in these countries. Since I have mentioned about Europe, US, we know that what's happening in those regions, there is population aging happening. So there is, many people are at that particular age where they can't work. And what's happening is there is a productive population deficit where people, there is a gap, job vacancies available or skill gaps in these European countries. And many times you could see that those skill gaps were filled by, or the job vacancies were filled by migrants from, for instance, India or Philippines, or some of the Eastern European countries. So migration always help balance demography, as in the case of Europe, where population aging is a fact. That's the case with Japan. That's the case with many of these developed countries. The population is aging. There is low birth rate. Because of this low birth rate and aging population, there is a gap in productive working population. That's filled by migrants. So obviously, then in that sense, they are contributing to economic growth. While these migrants are there, they are paying taxes as well. So they are contributing to the economy in that sense. When job vacancies are filled, that's actually increasing economic productivity and obviously then output. So in that sense as well, migration is beneficial to the receiving countries, as against the popular political public narrative that migration is a threat to these destination countries. Again, it depends on which side of the spectrum of the conversation you are standing at. Everything has its pros and cons, and that's exactly what is my conversation today. The cost of migration. But before getting into that, I just wanted to also point out that, two of the major benefits for the receiving countries in terms of migration is one, cultural diversity. So here again, you can consider cultural diversity as a good thing, or you can consider that as a very bad thing. So there is this concept of super diversity. This concept was given by Steven Wertevok. 2007, he published an article in which he explained what super diversity is, which means that the diversity, which is super diversity, which becomes like, sort of difficult to comprehend and difficult to manage. That concept is there. Then the concept of multiculturalism is there. Multiculturalism as a concept and as a policy. So which means that, cultural diversity is a good thing. And migrants can promote, and the migrants can practice their cultural practices and traditions in their private sphere, as well as some bit of in the public sector as well, with government funding. For instance, some festivals, or what is it called, like film festivals, for instance, or dance festivals. So it's more about pluralism. Many of these developed countries have multiculturalism as their policies. Some even tried more advanced, multiculturalism policies in the name of interculturalism, where they're talking about, inter-community conversations happening, inter-community feasting happening. There is all these countries are so innovative that they tried several of these policies. So you can consider cultural diversity, ethnic diversity as a good thing. As well as, like, depending on your political positioning, you can consider, you can sort of project it as a very negative issue as well. So when we most of the narrative saying that cultural diversity is not a good thing for the receiving countries, the proponents of such a view says that that will erode the national identity. For instance, while I was doing my PhD, I have interviewed one of the House of Lords MP, and he was a very pro, British MP who was sort of anti-immigration, having anti-immigration stand. So he said that the Britishness. So when he said Britishness, from the post-colonial discourse of this side of the world, we could see it as white Christian male-centric, discourse. But he said that Britishness is no longer there because of the flooding of immigrants to Britain. Uh, so I asked him, what is this Britishness? How he defined Britishness. So he said, it's about being like being British born, white. That sort of a Britishness is what was in his definition of Britishness. So I asked him about Britain being a grouping of Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England, which is four different national identities together. So you can have conversations on cultural diversity, or civic multiculturalism, but um, in our conversation today, I would like to project it as a very positive aspect, that pluralism or cultural diversity enrich the destination societies. Highly contested concept, but I just wanted to introduce that as well. So irrespective of all of these benefits of migration that I have pointed out to you, which isn't new to you. That's why I didn't go much of the details of the benefits of migration. We all have read a lot about the benefits of migration, and especially economic benefits of migration, developmental benefits of migration. But I really would like to sort of point you that migration comes with substantial social costs and consequences as well. So when I say this substantial social costs and consequences, what we have to understand is this is applicable to migrants themselves, their families, communities, migrant communities, or whichever community migrants are from, and the wider society, both destination and origin countries. So it's there are social costs associated with it. And the point which I would like to make is social cost is something, or the conversation of social cost is something which isn't very much there in the academic discourses, or even in the policy discourses. I'll come to that. But before that, let me briefly introduce this concept of social cost. So social cost is basically, it includes both the private costs or individual costs. As a migrant, what is the impact of migration for me? So that's a very individual private cost of migration, as well as the impact of migration on my family as a migrant, as well as the society I'm from. So this is what is called social cost. And the focus here is the sociality of migration, not the economics of migration. And then here we focus more on the social issues arising out of the phenomena of migration. What makes social cost different from other consequences of migration is the focus on social aspects of migration. That's why in the beginning itself, I have mentioned migration is most of the time, majority of the time, migration is dealt with, especially in the academic sectors, policy sectors, as an economic phenomenon. And that's coming from the very basic understanding, which is a very valid understanding, that people migrate for bettering their livelihood. So most of the time, you could see that, majority of the migration, I'm not talking about forced migration here. Refugee movement is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about voluntary migration or migration for work and study. We could see that the underlying motive, when we ask this question, why are you migrating? The underlying answer or the reason for migration for work for study is to better the living conditions. So, the moment we say that better the living conditions, economics become a major aspect of it. Or remittances, for a sending country, that's the term. Remittances become a major aspect of it. And many times, because of this overemphasis on the economic aspects of migration or economies of migration, we tend to sort of overlook the social aspects of migration or sociality of migration. Since my training is in the social sciences and humanities, and my methodology, as I mentioned in the beginning, is more qualitative, I always focus on social costs. And somehow I always say this, that I can't really work with numbers. I feel so tired, like when I look at an Excel sheet full of numbers, or census survey sheets. So it's more like soothing for me when I talk to migrants, when I do the qualitative field work and stuff. And most of the time I focus on the, as I mentioned, the sociality of migration. And that is where we look at social costs included. That's there in the whole phenomena of migration. And the social cost impacts migrants personally, that's the individual case, his families, and the community he is hailing from, or the society he is hailing from. And basically, when we look at the social cost of migration, what we are trying to do is, we are trying to contextualize migration in the social situation and experiences of the migrant family and the larger society. So we are placing like the migration as a phenomenon, as an economic phenomenon, as it is understood largely. We are trying to place it in this sociality or social context of the country, of the sending country, of the receiving country. This is what we try to do. And this is coming from the very basic understanding or hypothesis that migration is a social phenomenon, with again, economic, political, cultural, environmental implications. So why I'm saying that migration is a social phenomenon, it's when we look at it from a social perspective, from a social worldview, we could see that with migration, migrants sending money back home, their remittances, it's not just that their livelihood is getting better. It's not just that they have more money in their hand. It's not just that their consumption pattern is changing. But what is also happening is social mobility is happening. And upward social mobility is happening also. For instance, like, I'm not saying that caste is something which fades with migration and the remittances or the money that's coming in. Caste is still a reality in India. Caste, religion, all of that. But you could see that with all of that existing, there is a social mobility that's happening. And also not just social mobility, sometimes even social reforms happens along with this money that's coming in from foreign countries that's sent by the migrants. Also, in the migrant, the several studies of, for instance, Filippo Ocello's study, you could see that, like, their study says that with migration, migrant communities and their families would be having a more cosmopolitan and modern worldview. And that's something which you can connect with my the instance which I have mentioned, my interview with that returned migrant, saying that I have much more exposure when I was in Gulf, and I look at things differently when I'm back. I wanted my kids to have education, rather than sending them to Gulf maybe for work after their 12th or degree. No, I don't want that to happen. That's what I have done. So this person that I have had the conversation with, interview with, he migrated to Gulf after his 12th standard. At that time, it was called pre-degree. So he migrated after his pre-degree, which is, he was 18 years old then, 18 or 19 years old. And he went to Gulf. He worked in Gulf for 25 years or so. He came back, and in between he came back, he got married. He had he's having children. All of them now, two of them going to college and one in school. And he very clearly said that, oh, when I was in Gulf, I have seen people with better educational qualification, with high educational qualification, doing better in those countries. I don't want my son to be working as a mechanic or as a carpenter like me, but I want my kids to, children to have better education. So, that sort of a broader worldview or cosmopolitanism is something which, again, you could see when migrants go to these many foreign countries, and when they come back, they share the experiences there with the family. So family are, in that sense, the indirectly getting exposed to various world, various societies, international societies for that matter. Also, like, this is the case of Gulf that I have mentioned, or people going to Gulf that I have mentioned. But think about families together migrating to Europe, or the families joining the male migrants or female migrants who have independently gone first to these Western and European countries as nurses, as doctors, medical practitioners, caregivers, etc., etc. You could see that, like, they will be there for some time, get their residence visa done, citizenship. They're exposed to a new culture. They actually negotiate their identities. Second generation, third generation, fourth and subsequent generations of Indians. Sahu sir has just mentioned discussed about Indian diaspora. And you could see that second, third, fourth, and subsequent generations of Indian diaspora, they do better well in education and in jobs even. So, all of this shows that there is sociality to it. It's not just economics. It's not just money and savings and remittances, but sociality to migration. And similarly, we could also see that what happens with migration is the how migration sort of creates public histories and narratives in a society. And that public histories and narratives would be something to do with migration. Again, from my own field, I could give you an example. There are these myths in society, right? There are societal myths. Every society would be having its own myths about, could be some personality, could be something related to religion, for instance, traditions, identity, etc., etc. There are stories. There are, age-old stories and myths. So similarly, when you look at the history of migration from Kerala, you could see that there is this one myth of Cheraman Perumal. He was a king in Kerala who migrated to Oman. In fact, he has gone to Saudi for doing Hajj. He was a Hindu ruler, but got attracted to Islam because of his interactions with Arab traders at that point of time. India was having, spice trades with Arabs and Europe, Portuguese, Britain, etc., colonial time. But before that, most of the trade was happening between Indians and Arabs, and it was during this time that the king got interested in Islam religion, and he went to Saudi, Mecca for Hajj. He didn't come back. On his way back to India, back to Kerala, he died at this place in Salalah, Oman. And this myth was something which is there in the public memory of Malayalis, of Keralites. This is something like, this is a very, very popular narrative. Whenever we talk about Gulf migration from Kerala, the story of Cheraman Perumal comes to, like, into the conversation. So such myths. Similarly, what is happening in my society? Again, I'm working in Pune. I studied throughout my studies. I was in Delhi, and for the past 6 years, I'm based in Pune, and I'm working there in this flame university. But every now and then, my relatives and friends in Gulf countries, they ask me to, join them in the Gulf countries. This is something like, and I always sort of, this intrigued me. I would say not every, maybe, but then majority of the youngsters in Kerala, they have this, I don't know what to say. They have this sense that if they want to excel in life economically, to make money, to have better living standards, they have to migrate either to Gulf countries or to other countries, including Western and European countries. So where is this? So I have asked a couple of times to my respondents, where is your interest to migrate coming from? And you could see that in Kerala, every home would be having at least one migrant. This is more or less like, Punjab and Gujarat, where there is again, that culture of migration is there. So I'm talking about this culture of migration. Where is this culture of migrations coming from? You could see that all the states and union territories in India doesn't have the same intensity of this culture of migration. There are some areas where some districts within states where people don't migrate at all. So, you could see a lot of variations, but when you ask people who are looking forward to migrate, and you ask, especially from these states, for instance, Punjab, Gujarat, Kerala, Tamil Nadu even, you will see them. You will hear from them saying that, that's how it is. Even though they can't really explain where this idea of migrating and the thought that they can survive only if they migrate, where that is coming from, we could see that it's all coming from the public narrative about migration. There is a culture of migration. So when we talk about culture of migration, instead of economies of migration, you could see that migration is a social phenomena, and then obviously there would be social cost associated with it. Now we are looking at migration as a social phenomenon. So obviously we have to also look at what are the migration induced social strains that's affecting migrants themselves, their families that these migrants left behind, the families that the migrants take along with them to foreign countries. What about returnees? What are the social costs that affect return migrants, and largely the society, be it be Indian society, be it be any other society. Similarly, I think it's a good idea to also have an idea about the psychological cost associated with migration, which is again often not really discussed, or often not really featured in the discourses in migration studies or in diaspora studies. So this has to get momentum in our academic sphere, in our public policy sphere, because several of the policies, and many times even the policies, think about our immigration policy, think about the diaspora policy that we are having. Sahu sir was just mentioning about OCI card. What is the purpose of OCI card? More than we always say that, on principle, we say that that's basically to make sure that the migrant diaspora, Indian diaspora communities have an opportunity to retain their link with the home country. But we could see that there is an element of FDIs and investments, which becomes, a major concern of our governments. So, the point is, we have to be aware of the social aspects of migration, and the policies should also reflect the sociality of migration, which is at this point of time is largely lacking. I'll come to that in a while. When we talk about social costs of migration, we can look at it from different perspectives. I'll briefly get into that, and then I'll end the conversation so that you can ask. If there is any questions, you can ask me questions, or we can have an open discussion, whatever you prefer. But when we look at the host societies, the social cost of migration on the host societies or the destination countries, we could see that the population or the demography will change when migration happens. And many a times, as I have mentioned earlier, many a times, that's been considered as having negative impact on the social institutions in those countries. For instance, we often have heard that with migrants coming in, there is competition for jobs, there is competition for social welfare, there is competition for housing. So these conversations. So demographic change is, I would say, one social cost of migration for the host societies. But at the same time, what we have to keep in mind is sometimes migration rectify demographic imbalance as well, as in the case of European countries or Japan, as I mentioned, there is population aging. So, it could be at the same time a cost as well as a benefit, but demographic change. Again, as I mentioned, obviously when people comes in, that would change social and institutional structures. A very good instance that I could think of is in 2010, Britain introduced a bill, an act, which is Equality Act of 2010, where they have, inserted a provision to make caste discrimination a criminal offense in Britain. For instance, from India, Indians were migrating to Britain since 1600s. The first known history of Indians migrating to Britain was even before 1600, apparently, because one of the record in the British Archive says that before the formation of East India Company, one of the ships that's from Britain to India, to Gujarat, if I remember correctly, was already having 4 Indians on board. So, what I wanted to sort of point out is maybe since the 17th century onwards, there is this migration of Indians to Britain, to the UK was happening. But it was in 2010, that they introduced this concept of caste in their policy. So what we could see is a change in their policy perspective, the change in their understanding of the sociality of Indian diaspora in Britain. They acknowledging that, there is caste discrimination that's happening in Britain among the Indian diaspora. So there were many cases, in fact, and there is DSN, Dalit Network, I don't remember, Dalit Solidarity Network. They have given multiple cases regarding caste discrimination in Britain, Indian diaspora, among Indian diaspora. So that's when they inserted this particular provision in the act, national act of that country. So you could see that with migration of different ethnicities from different part of the world to the destination countries, obviously the social and institutional structures will change. It's very difficult for any country, and I think it's understandable that any country would be difficult for them to navigate the situation of sudden social changes or institutional structural changes. So that's something which the not just the institutions, but economy and society has to be ready to accept that change and integrate that change. That's where again, we can talk about how that's done during Merkel's time in Germany, or how it wasn't done during the time of Trump in the United States of America, or there are many instances that we can think about. Similarly, what happens when migrants for work comes to or goes to these host societies or destination societies, many times what happens is displacement of nationals from occupations. So this sometimes, but then again, we can counter critique this particular argument, saying that many times what migrants do is 3D jobs, demeaning, degrading, difficult jobs in the more unskilled or low skilled and informal sectors of the economy. That's something which we could also counter this argument. But at the same time, we know that largely IT professionals, for instance, when they migrate, or the skilled workers when they migrate, there is an argument that they are replacing the nationals. Recently, again, coming back to a point which I have earlier mentioned about nationalization of economic sectors in the Gulf countries, you could see that currently in almost all the 6 GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, that includes Kuwait, Oman, Saudi, Qatar, UAE, all of those countries, you could see that nationalization or Arabization process is going on. And in Saudi, this particular nitakat. So in several of the sectors, the companies and the public and private companies should only employ Arab national in key positions. So what's happening is this is sort of a policy solution they have introduced for migrants replacing the nationals, educated nationals. So again, it depends a lot on the context. When initially when people were migrating to the Gulf countries, there weren't many educated Arabs at that point of time. They were more, leading the Bedouin kind of livelihood and life. So they weren't very much educated. When the oil was invented, when the drilling companies started working in Gulf, and the Gulf boom happened, or the oil boom in Gulf happened, they were in need of, for instance, typewriters, stenographers, accountants, also to work in the oil fields and the oil wells. So that's when this migration boom has happened, associated with oil boom in the 60s and 70s in the Gulf. So that time, unemployment among nationals wasn't the case. But right now, with all the development that has happened in the Gulf countries, there were educational institutions, more importance to education given among, especially among the Arab youngsters, younger generation of Arabs. So they are educated now, and obviously then if the key employment positions are held by migrants, then there is going to be that's the situation right now. There is unemployment among the nationals. So as against the social cost, these countries are implementing nationalization policies. Transculturalism is something which I have already mentioned, because of the coming in of migrants and refugees and all of those people from different ethnicities. The culture of the receiving countries or the host countries, destination countries changes. Food consumption pattern changes, languages changes. There would be hybridity in cultural, social, language use, etc., etc. Creolization happens. That's another term. Or, for instance, in Britain, chicken tikka is their national cuisine, one of the national cuisines. So that sort of change happens, and that's what is called transculturalism. We also, when the host societies consider all of this as negative social costs, then what happens is that really makes the process of integration of immigrants to those societies difficult. Then what happens is the impact of this approach, or this social cost on host societies, affecting the migrants negatively, because they sort of there would be hostility against them. There would be anti-immigrant sentiments among public sentiments against them. That will make their life difficult. That will make their integration process difficult. Their identity will be questioned every now and then. They have to then negotiate those contested spaces of identity in the host societies. So this is the social cost that I would like to mention about what's happening in the host societies or destination societies. Now, when we look at migrants and their families, we know that, for instance, in the case of expatriates or the migrants going to Gulf countries, they are going there for kafala is the system. They are going there on sponsorship. It's contractual visa. Many a times their visa is for work visa is for 1 year or 3 years. They have to extend it. Some companies extend it. Some companies, especially in the times of nationalization, Arabization that's going on, many a times their visas are not extended. COVID have played a very huge impact on the livelihoods of these migrants. Many lost jobs. Many had to, in the Vande Bharat flights, many had to return back to India without even taking the end of the service benefits. So, in such a situation, what happens is, from the migrant side, when we look at, what's happening with the migrants, we could see that there is uncertainty. There is always an uncertainty about their migration status. They don't know whether when will their job gets terminated, whether they will have to come back to India. When they come back to India, what will I do? It's another major uncertainty. So, and also this is the case of GCC countries, Gulf countries. Now, another corridor which Indians largely migrate to is Western and European countries, as I have mentioned earlier. So there what happens is the differential treatment on the basis of race and ethnicity. The treating them as second-class citizens, racial discrimination sometimes they have to face. For instance, also the hierarchy that's existing in the society and in which level Indian diaspora, Indian immigrant communities, they sort of exist. All of this matters, and these are also social causes of migration affecting migrants directly. When we look at also the migrants who have migrated and the social cost of this phenomena of migration, we could see that they're dislocated. They're dislocated from home. And that's what we in migration studies, we talk about myth of return. We talk about how much migrants nostalgia. Again, Sahu sir has in his lecture towards the end of it was talking about Indian diaspora's interest in consuming Indian products, Indian cultural products. So and all of that is coming from, you could see that there is this dislocation, the sentiment, the feeling of dislocation is there, dislocation from the cultural root. And not just that, but in the destination societies, there is this feeling of alienation, there is this feeling of exclusion, there is this feeling of real and perceived racial discrimination or ethnic discrimination, or if not discrimination, ethnic and racial discrimination, but differential treatment at least. So this makes migrants emotionally very vulnerable, and that impacts their mental well-being. Most of the time, this is something which we don't, again, this won't reflect in policies or in many of the academic conversations. We don't really take into consideration the emotional well-being of the migrants. So that's when we look at migration from the social perspective, the sociality of migration, we could actually get into this otherwise unexplored or less explored aspect of migration. Similarly, something which we could also think about is how, for instance, it's not just the migrants. Many times, when people migrate to Western European countries, as I have mentioned, family would also follow them. They will take citizenship there and everything. So they settle there in that sense. And many times, the parents would also join the son or daughter who is there in these countries. So think about it at a very later stage of their life. These elderly parents were trying to negotiate their lifestyle. They're trying to sort of adjust their lifestyle in a foreign country. It could be terrible cold, terrible heat, and language is completely alien sometimes. They are very unfamiliar of the terrain. Second generation, third generation kids, younger generation in the family might not be connecting with the elderly grandparents. So there is a lot of lifestyle adjustment that's happening among the elders who migrate to these countries, along with the children's family, their children's family. Similarly, when we look at the subsequent generations, like foreign born Indian diasporic generations, when we look at it, we call it third culture kids in migration studies. And when we look at their identity, you could see that there is a lot of generational differences between them and their parents and their grandparents. So all of that, and how that's affecting family ties, how that's affecting the values of the family, how that's affecting their connect with India. So all of this comes within the idea of social costs of migration, how that's sort of altering the relations with their family as well as their home country, or I would say more than home country, their parental home country or their grandparental home country. I think that's also an interesting area to look at. Similarly, when we think about migrants and their families, we could see that there are many other implications as well. For instance, when a person is is in absence for longer time, spending time in a foreign country working or or settling there, there would be weaker family connections. Larger family connections would get weaker. Also in the case of, for instance, those migrating to Gulf countries, as I mentioned, most of the time it's the male who migrate, and there is this salary ceiling for bringing in family, for family migration. There is a salary ceiling, and we know that from India, majority of the migrants who migrate to Gulf countries are low skilled migrants, so the salary ceiling won't let them bring their families to these countries. And also because of the nature of migration, because this is a temporary migration that we are talking about when we discuss Gulf countries, rather than Western countries or European countries. So they know that the migration is temporary, so they try to save as much as they can be possible while they are in those countries. So they prefer not to bring their family with them, because that will induce more expenditure staying in those countries. They have to find a place to stay with the family, education, the expenditure of educating the kids in those countries. So they prefer not to bring their families along with them, and then there would be this long separation from the family. Especially, this could lead to estrangement in husband-wife relations, in issues in the family life. Also, behavioral issues with children. Similarly, there is this feeling of void among the migrants, that they are not caring enough about children or spouses, or they are not really fulfilling the responsibilities as son, as husband, as father, etc., etc. So this is something, again, is very important, because there are many cases of depression and even suicides among Indian migrants in the Gulf countries. When you compare the statistics of suicides among migrants in Gulf countries, we could see that the number is really high among Indian migrants, when we compare the numbers with, for instance, Bangladeshis or Pakistanis who are from the same South Asian region. So this is again something, the issue of suicides, or the issue of mental health issues that's among the Indian migrant communities in especially in Gulf countries, is something which we haven't dealt with. I have mentioned why families are left behind, because of the family salary ceiling in the case of GCC countries. Similarly, in some of the Western countries also, there is this policy that migrants can't bring in their families, because then they know that they will settle down in those countries. So again, that depends on what sort of immigration policy that we are looking at. But I think something which universally we should agree upon should be that every person is having the right to family, and it should be acknowledged as a fundamental human right, is what I would really like to point out. In the case of women left behind, this is a case mostly, again, you will see in the GCC country migrants, that husbands will go and the wives will stay back, taking the full responsibility of the family in the absence of their men. There is an interesting study I have read recently about Punjab. And this, in the 90s, there were so many studies on this particular aspect in Kerala as well. We had this term coined called Gulf wife syndromes, because husbands are away, and in between they will come for vacation for a month, and the wife will get pregnant during that particular time. So then rest of all the responsibilities will be undertaken by the by this wife, by the woman herself. And the kind of emotional burden that she's suffering out of all of this, because of the long absence of the husband, as well as the responsibility of the kids, and also the larger care of other family members. There would be parents, there would be several other things that the woman has to, this lady, I mean the wife has to take into account or taken care of. So some of the studies says that women are out of this whole process. Women are getting empowered, because the husbands are sending money back home. Women spend the money, or they sort of manage the family finances. This is one narrative saying that women are in that sense empowered. There is a counter argument to this, which is asking that whether it's real empowerment, because agency of decision making might be still with the male members of the family. So how much women is empowered is the question. Whether it is empowerment, or is it sort of like attaining a life skill, going to bank, writing a check, or withdrawing money from the bank, enrolling their children to a school, or taking medical related decisions and taking elderly or kids to the hospital. Is it life skill attainment or real empowerment is a question that in the 1990s in Kerala, in the migration study scenario in Kerala was discussing. Recently, these sort of questions are coming up from the Punjab side. So it's again, really interesting how women left behind are affected by migration. Again, not economically, but also emotionally, psychologically, and socially. So when I say socially, there is another aspect to it. That's the biased community societal views about migrant wives. Many a times they say that since there is a long absence of husbands, wives are tend to sort of stray in their marital affairs, and all the biased view against them. So this is sort of like again an eye opener, that these sort of conversations are happening in the society, which is having a huge implication on these left behind women and the family, and also the migrant, obviously. So again, when we look at sociality of migration, this is something which comes to the whole conversation. Similarly, as I have mentioned, this point I already have mentioned, like how migration of father affects children. I myself have friends whose parents were in Gulf, and how that affected their behavioral pattern. There is always this feeling of void. I still remember there was a friend of mine who always used to say that even when he was at his 20s and now in his 30s, he still mentions that while I was growing up, my father wasn't with me. So, that feeling of void. There is this case of, again, one of the interview that I have taken of the daughter of a domestic worker. So I asked her, I was taking this interview of the mother and the daughter together. So after interviewing the mother, who was a domestic worker in Saudi Arabia for 13 years, if I remember correctly. So after that interview, I sort of, continued the interview with the daughter. So the daughter was throughout in Kerala with the grandparents, while mom was in Saudi as a domestic worker. So I asked her, how was it and how was your experience and everything. So she said that I miss my mom a lot, and at every stage of my life, she wasn't there. Even though she was there over phone and later, like, social media and stuff, but she said that I really missed her in my formative years. So she said that she was more closer to grandmother than her mother. And I could really see the pain in mother's, eyes while I was having this conversation with them. So that feeling of void is something which I think we have to study, we have to explore further. And also, the sense of insecurity when one of the parent is absent, or both the parents are absent for long from these children's life. Similarly, elderly person. Again, I mean, again, as I mentioned, most of the instances I could narrate from my own research experiences. So I was having this interview with some of those left behind elderly in the central part of Kerala. So central part of Kerala, you could see this double-storied houses, very desert looking double-storied houses, and there would be this elderly parents living there alone. There would be a helper or a housemaid, or a live-in, most of the time a live-in house help with these people and elderly people. And I asked them, how it is and everything. So I asked them whether they wanted to, why can't they go to UK or Canada with their children. So they said that the children were calling them to join them in those countries, but they don't want to go because of, obviously, I mean, some of them have even visited for a month or two, so they have some experience of those countries, and they said we can't really adjust with the weather there, we can't really adjust with the situation, I mean, general social situations there. There is nobody to talk. We have to stay in their flat, in their home, without even talking to anyone. How long can I watch TV? I can watch TV from here as well. So even if I migrate with to the children settled in Canada or US, I have to spend alone at their home there. Here, at least I can go out, even though I'm alone here, but I can go out. I can talk to my neighbors. I can go to the nearby shop and sit there for some time, have a conversation with, local people. It's much better there. And what is lacking, and placing this conversation in the larger Indian context, we could see that some of the states are having very good palliative care systems. But in India, what is lacking is geriatric care system. And looking at, the migration pattern from India, not just from Kerala, Punjab or Gujarat, but also these days from Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, UP, Bihar, you could see that, there is going to be many more houses in India with only elderly parents staying. So we should have this conversation in the academic, in the policy realm. And we should have policies in place to take care of our elderly population. That too, elderly population living alone because of their kids, their children in migrated to foreign countries. This is something which is, again, as I mentioned, lacking in our conversations. This needs to be reflected in our discourses, and that could only happen when we brought in the social costs of migration into the discourses of migration, academic and public. Sahu sir, what do I have time?
Debate's almost over, but
Okay, I'm winding it up then. So just to mention the social cost of women migration, this point I already have mentioned, because when the mother migrates, women migrate, if she is a mother, then the absence of mother in the children's life who have left behind is something which we have to take into consideration. And many times also what happens is, these women migrants who migrated to these foreign countries as domestic workers or caregivers or nurses or doctors, or for any profession for that matter, they ended up running two households, especially in the case of domestic workers and caregivers. They will have to take care of their employer's house as well as their own house remotely. So, the emotional burden is what we have to think about. Most of the time, we sort of pointed out how much they are contributing to our economy and stuff. But the emotional burden that these women goes through, and not just these women, but also their family, their kids back home, that's something which we have to be, concerned about, and we should be exploring more in that sense. An interesting phenomenon that's associated with this particular point is the global care chain phenomenon. So this global care chain phenomenon means this women migrant has migrated to work in with a family abroad, but then she might be having elderly and their children or her children back home to be taken care of. What's happening is, many times with their foreign earned salary, they will be hiring a domestic worker at home to manage her household while she was managing her employer's household abroad. So this whole phenomena is what is called global care chain phenomena. This is an interesting concept in migration studies. If anybody interested can take a look at it. Similarly, societal biases, again, already I have mentioned, many a times, especially in the case of nurses, I have heard that, when they migrate, people will say that, oh, okay, they are there for whatever, other work. They would be accused of infidelity and, all of that. So that societal bias is also there. During the COVID time, another sort of societal bias that we have seen, there were studies about Sri Lankan women migrants in this particular scenario, saying that those women migrants coming back during COVID time were referred to as COVID bombs, that they are spreading COVID in Sri Lanka. Similarly, like, in the initial flight, Vande Bharat flight, when migrants came back to India, there was suspicions, there was fear that these migrants are going to spread COVID all the more in India as well. So, many types of societal biases and prejudice that migrants have to face. My last point is about returnees. So we could see that, when returnees came back to India or any other country for that matter, after a long, phase of migration, say 25 years, 30 years of migration, obviously it would be difficult for them to sort of understand and comprehend the change that has happened in the home country. So for them, time is sort of lagged. And then it's very difficult for them to relocate themselves from their country of work to the home country and reintegrate to this society on return. We don't have much of policy or systems in place, structural, institutional structures in place to ease that reintegration process. Every time we would be talking about return migration for the sake of talking about it. But, we could see that in India, in the case of, even the states, there isn't any proper viable reintegration policies that's existing. And this is seriously something which, again, we have to focus on, especially since a phase of migration is getting over for India. Those people who have migrated, again coming back to Gulf, who have migrated to Gulf during the 70s, 80s, 90s, they are coming back now, and that too at an age of 60 or 55 or 58. So coming back, there is this uncertainty, and the question they ask, what will I do next? Should I sit at home, ideally, taking care of grandchildren's, or should I start a business? Should I start a stationery shop? What should I do? I don't know anybody in my locality. My friends, my peers at that point of time when I was 20, either they are already, passed away, or I have lost contact with them. My family themselves is not really not so close to me as I have expected. I really don't know what to do. And this conversation has actually happened with me when I was, interviewing my respondents. So this issue of relocation and reintegration is something which, again, comes within the conversation of social cost of migration. So to conclude, what is needed is more studies, more in-depth studies on the social costs of migration. And I hope this conversation will lead to many more studies on social costs. These are some of the suggested readings. 2013 India Migration Report it's the featured subject was social cost of migration. I'll share the PPT with you. I think Sahu sir has already shared the PPT.
Yes,
yeah, so any questions I'm happy to answer, or any discussion. I'm really sorry for keeping it really long.
No, it is such a vast area and very complex area. It demands good discussion, and you have done very good. Okay,
thank you so much, sir.
Vijay Nair has question.
Sure.
Good evening, Dr. Divya.
Hello, sir.
I'm one of the migrant living in Kuwait since more than 2 decades with
wow.
my family.
Uh-huh.
The case studies which you have mentioned, it was reflecting our life. We are really living such life over here. And regarding the conversation, you told about what attracts a particular area and the people, because all are not coming here. Yeah. Only particular state and particular village people or some area people only are again and again coming back. That because, sense of like security, they feel, okay, one of the member from our village had gone and he's doing well, so let us also go and try our luck over there. That's the first reason for us to come here. The second thing about the family return migration, just now lastly you have mentioned, yes, you scared us. Truly, we whenever I discuss with my husband, come on, chalo abhi chalte hai. Now it's time for us to go. He says, "Kya karenge?"
No, you don't
What
have
we
to be
will do?
scared of. I can give you some solutions. I can give you some real exciting instances as well from my recent study. So don't worry about that.
No, there are so many things we have thought of. It is not about financially,
Yeah.
like the people, as I said, as you said, that when we come back, we are still in the same that 2 decades before how the society used to be.
True.
But in fact, it is not the same. Whenever we visit there, we find every time new things. Even our family members, sometimes they behave strangely with us. Like we feel we are very new to this place. And no
Yeah.
friends, trust me, we don't have any friends.
Oof.
So that is another issue. If
Yeah.
like person like me, I was born in Goa, brought up in Karnataka, married to Mumbai with a Keralite family member, and came to Kuwait. So we are here for so long, and when we go back, like we have always which state to go and stay. That also we think about, like whether to go this state. Agar udhar jayenge, to who is there for us? And no friends. And what we will do? Like this is not the story of me alone. Of course, almost all the Gulf people are facing. So you said the depth studies. Yes, deeply this part has to be studied, and especially the emotionally. Ma'am, when I came newly to Kuwait, those days there wasn't any telephone or something. Like if we are to call also, it was very expensive, and literally we used to wait for letter to come that used to take more than 15 days. And in a month, only 2 times I used to receive letters. So it was okay. I'm a literate person. I can write for family. What about those who can't write?
True.
So hope you all will work on this.
Oh, ma'am, I think, as social scientists, as migration studies, and Sahu sir has already mentioned GRFDT. I'm part of GRFDT. We are doing a lot. These courses and, interactions with each one of you. I think, and the point is that, like, we need more studies. We need more discussion on these issues. I remember, like, as I told you, my recent, currently, right now, I'm doing my field work. And this fieldwork is about return migrants. And what something which came out of all the interviews is that our government has to do more about this particular issues. I mean, there should be certain, how will I put it, like there should be certain, like just like Indian associations in Gulf countries, there should be returnees associations where you can have an active social life on return, because it's the returnees can sit together and can share the stories. They can connect it well. If you're talking, if you're going to share your 20 years of life in Kuwait to a non-migrant, that person might not understand or comprehend what you're saying and what you have gone through. I think the best way is to have such collectives, like returnees collectives, or something of that sort would really help. But the problem here is we actually, the society I'm talking about, the governments I'm talking about, even academicians, we are we are also to be blamed for this. We haven't really talked about this. We haven't really sort of discussed about it at a deeper level. So that is needed. And I'm really happy to have this conversation with you. 20 years in a foreign country is, I would say, you're more experienced than we academicians. It's your life.
Thank you so much. Here again, I would like to mention one point about the government. I don't know what is the problems government is exactly facing, because our knowledge is very less in this part. But I can tell during Russia and Ukraine war, they wanted to bring so many students back, and the people who are living in Russia, India, but
Indians,
they were unable to get the data. The same thing, it applies to GCC also. Like they don't know how many people are coming and how many people are going. When they themselves don't have data, then how we common people can get? There are registration drives, but all are educated to do that registration. And
Totally,
there are association. How many percentage of people are involved in associations? How many people can afford to pay the registration, association membership fees Everybody cannot do. And
Totally.
in Gulf, there are very strict rules. Yeah, housemaid, she cannot be a member of the association, any Indian association.
Yeah.
And there are many workers who cannot. And it is area-wise, place-wise, associations are created over here. And of course, the association president, his mentality, if he want to keep, he will keep some member, otherwise he won't give membership to others. That part also plays a huge role. And political ground also, if you are some political group, okay, come, otherwise you don't come. Religious, etc., etc., etc. If we go to talk on this topic, it will be like a big topic to discuss on. But I don't want to talk on that. My concern is, as you said, return migration.
Yeah.
If we are coming back and we need to have form an association or any group, for that first we should have how many people are coming out of the country. That record should be there.
Yeah. True, ma'am.
Then they can think of the people who are coming back.
True. That is so true. Data is a major issue, not just in the case of international migration, internal migration as well.
So it is not do you think, doctor, it is so difficult to collect the data or manage the data? Because every person is exiting from the airport. He is not exiting from the sky automatically.
Exactly.
Opening the parachute and coming to any country. No, right? He is exiting from airport. So why there is no record in the airport? Why they can't do that?
So there are, as far as I know, there are records, but the records are so scattered. And somehow, we haven't taken that interest in data, collection and data compilation. That is where the problem is. Sahu sir was about to say something.
No, actually, two interesting thing I remembered also. Since, she was talking about people who are illiterate and they're depending upon letters. I found in Hyderabad, I was there for 8 years, in GPO, that big post office. There are 2-3 people who actually with only pen, they'll be moving there. Okay. Their main job is throughout the day, they'll write letter for others. And they get some money. So I can relate. Second thing is about data thing. I remember another beautiful story about the Basque diaspora. Basque diaspora, near Spain. So these people, they don't know about their own migration. They don't have anything. But when the social media came, so these people used to write their stories, connecting their stories, and Basque, they all connected and all got together, and they discovered their very big diaspora actually, more than their own country people. So later on they got united, they got a website, they got everything. So sometimes, return migrants are, I think, better educated. They may not always need to depend upon government to provide data. If you depend another 20 years, no data will come.
Yeah, I think migrants, returnees especially have to be innovative.
So with social media, so many ways we should involve. I don't think, data is a big problem, but what to do? Okay, so we have to see innovative way. So
sir, what to do, you said. We can do it. It is not impossible now. When you can keep a telephone directory of all the people using particular telephone line, and you can keep a record of passports people are issuing, if you can keep a record of people issuing tickets,
I'm giving positive side.
Why can't we keep this data, sir? It is possible.
It is
if
very much
really
possible.
Government wanted, it is possible.
It is very much possible, but change is not happening and very difficult. I don't know, data in India, somehow we are not able to manage.
Ma'am, also the reason is we haven't yet mainstreamed conversations on migration. Migration is still in the sidelines of policy discussions. We have to bring it to the mainstream so that, all of this could be
Who will
heard.
bring, Dr. Divya, who will bring?
All of us.
Discussing other matters. This matter also has to go to Parliament. Someone has to discuss on this.
True,
who will? Which minister is interested to discuss on this matter?
I think that's where
no one, because we are not casting any vote. We are not a vote bank.
Exactly.
We are only sending money. We are funding only these things we are doing, and we are helping our state to develop the infrastructure, blah blah. But other things we are not doing. Especially if we are voting, sure, maybe there is something to vote. Also, we have to come and vote. So who will bear the expenses?
True,
So
true, ma'am.
we are not considered as one of the important members
Yeah.
for this. So you people who are already over there, you people
Yeah.
have to bring this,
Let's
at
be a
least
little
collection
politer.
of data.
I think he's becoming impolite.
Hello?
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. We are listening. We are listening. No,
Okay.
what you said is so true. And I think
You know the
we
pain.
will be having more
Maybe I
conversations.
sound a little louder, but you know the pain we are going
I
through.
know. I can relate to you. I'm working on this area for the past 11 years or so. So, I mean, and these are certain things which we, in our conversation, for instance, me and Zaf sir used to have this conversation all the time, or our team would be having, group would be having all the time. Let's hope for the best. I think, the first is mainstreaming this conversation. And, these are even today's, this conversation is one way of mainstreaming. And many more conversations for sure will be happening. I wish.
One more thing, even having a program like this, we know the history of people going abroad and all. These are all part to, whatever you're saying in that direction only. Okay, we have no history of migration, not many university offer. So these are all also important. We should know that there are so many people living outside. Okay, so
Thank you.
any other thing?
Sir, I have seen Swadesh raising his hand.
So
Long back.
Yeah, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening.
Uh,
How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, many issues are today you pointed out, quoting with Gulf migrants, returning migrants issues. Yeah, we also thought many times, what about the returning migrants? And the psychological also, they're distressed. Today, a lot of suicide is committing suicides in Gulf countries, very young minds. That is also a big issue. Yeah, you pointed out. And natural death also increased in cardiac arrest and something with
Yeah,
work
health
pressure.
issues.
And work sites, it's decreased that work sites and accidental
Yeah.
things, but increased this natural and suicidal
Suicide.
commit suicides
Yeah.
trends. Yeah, you really pointed out that.
Actually,
Lecture to us today.
I read material on social cost benefit in short, so many videos, but Divya has given very comprehensive and from very micro to macro, and the creatively she connected with the concepts like super diversity and all. I really, Divya, I appreciate it's very
Thank you so much,
comprehensive.
sir.
Sir, I just wanted to ask one question.
Sure.
You know, the question is many of the migrational studies, since we have started, we have been, of course, Gulf is the highest migrant space. But what about the migrants who are in other countries?
Yeah.
What is their social contact? You know, you talked about a couple of examples of the UK. But what about US and how is their socio-economic and what is their well-being? That is something which has not, in the discourse, I thought it was a little lesser. Because if you also look at it, what I had read about a couple of years ago, maybe more than that, was the depression rate in Kerala amongst women were also very high, and suicidal rates was also there, and somewhere it was linked to this whole migration also. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. And then more than women, because what happens when people migrate to Western societies and European societies, there is a possibility of family reunification as well as settling down there. This migration affects mostly the elderly parents, as I have mentioned. And, you will see that, they are staying alone. We don't have, in India, still it's a stigma to sort of, enroll these elderly parents in an, I don't really like the term, but old age home. We don't have that, we don't have that culture of sending away parents to institutions, as in the case of US or Europe. So, that stigma is still there. And many times these elderly parents end up staying alone at this huge mansion built by remittance. And it's a real irony. I mean, I always look at these houses and I feel like, oh, what an irony. Like, it's a huge mansion. So that's, I think, one of the major social costs that we have to discuss. The elderly parents with not much of geriatric care available in India. And this is the case of almost all the states, I guess. I don't know any state which is doing well in the geriatric care department. Palliative, as I have mentioned, palliative care is well developed in and well established in several of the states. Coming to those migrants staying in US, for instance, I have, again, I haven't done much work on Indian immigrants in or diaspora in US. That's why I didn't mention much about it. But whatever little research I have done, and a very brief qualitative research that I have done, I think some 5 years back, I was interviewing this family who was settled in US. The husband is working with, he is a scientist. Wife is a legal practitioner. They have 2 kids, girls of 5 years and 3 years at that point of time. And so this is the social cost, one of the social cost, I would say, that these 2 people, like the parents, husband and wife, or father and mother, they were so concerned about these kids growing up in a society which is totally different from their upbringing and the values that they have ingrained throughout their childhood or growing up phase in India. So they were saying that, I'm scared of my, especially they are children. They're saying that I wanted to send them back to the hometown. They are from Andhra Pradesh. So she said that she wanted to send them to Andhra, back to the grandparents, but grandparents were really old that they can't really manage these kids. Then they were also thinking at that point of time to send them to their brothers or sisters' family, but they are so confused whether to do that or not. This emotional turmoil itself is a social cost of migration. But again, we don't really talk much about it.
Yeah, and other thing also, sorry, I just...
Yeah, sure, please.
I was very interested to know, in the discourses, of course, there may be, because, there's been a lot of write-ups and other things as compared to the rest of India, of the southern states.
Yeah.
But have you, in your, research and other things, done a comparative analysis of the social cost of a southern state migrant and a northern state or an eastern state? The reason why I'm asking this is also the cultural context, the social context, as well as the economic context is quite different, and the whole mindset of settling and unsettling, the cultural acceptance and is quite, within India, when I look at migration, because I haven't done any migration studies outside, and I only got interested in it while doing this during the COVID system with the returning migrants. So I was also seeing, did you find any type of startling
differences, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say, the case of Punjab, for instance, and Punjab is migrating to Canada. So once I was attending this conference and we had a discussion. So there was a scholar along with me in that particular panel where she was discussing about Punjab is going to Canada and taking up work that is lesser than their qualification. So basically they are underemployed migrating to Canada. And we were discussing that, that culture of migrating to Canada or, Western European countries are there among the Punjabis. And I said that, oh, this is there among the Keralites, but it's more towards Gulf. So these sort of comparisons I have done, but not, again, as very truly that you have mentioned, it's a very valid point. India, the migration scenario in India, when we look at it, we could see that there are many patterns and trends. And there are regional patterns, like, how that's happening from south, north, northeast, east, and west. There is different pattern you could see. Within states, you will see different patterns. Say, for instance, Telangana, it's the northern state of Telangana, Karimnagar, and those areas where, they send more people to these countries than, the southern states of Telangana, if I remember it rightly. In the case of Kerala, there is a religious dimension to it. Muslims, migrate more to Gulf at one point of time initially. Christian nurses were migrating from Kerala to European and Western countries at the initial phase of migration. But then you will see that over the years, that pattern has changed, and religion becomes, much more balanced in the migration trends and pattern. So, you will find not just regional trends, but also religious, but also community. Some communities has this culture of migrating. That's again, very interesting when we look at India. So and that's why migration studies is something which is really exciting in the case of especially India, because of the diversity that we are having, regional diversity and all the rest of the diversity that we are having. But unfortunately, think about it, since we are talking about it, this is incidentally, I'm talking, this is not the topic for today, but do we have a university dedicated to study migration? We don't. And how many out of the numbers, like when we look at the statistics, I didn't quote any statistics in this conversation because it is out there. Statistics is like, World Bank statistics or UN, IOM's statistics. It's all out there. And Indians are the largest immigrant communities. In many of the countries, we are the ones, we are the dominating migrant ethnic community in many of these countries. But do we have a university dedicated to this? How many migration studies departments are there in Indian universities? Don't even think about a migration university. But then how many departments are there in Indian universities? Do we have an organization where all the migrant associations are connected? And so this is here. And, there is an umbrella association in Telangana, in your area, I know. But, do we have an Indian-wide some setup where we can bring in all the associations, returning association or migrant welfare association together so that we can have these conversations from different parts of the country? We don't have it. So, but I'm happy that the conversations are happening, at least among us who are interested in this area. Many more such conversation will happen is what my optimistic thought. And I'm really happy that, I'm always happy to have these conversations, and I'm really thankful to each one of you for listening to me, and also bringing in points and your perspectives. Abha ma'am, I guess somehow I sort of answered your.
No, thank you so much. I mean, it's too deep a well to take out the water. It's just a drop of it.
I know.
Yeah.
So thank you
so much, Vidya.
Abha works with UNDP, and she is also working on migration and other issues.
Wonderful.
So okay. So thank you, Divya, so much. I learned a lot from your talk, because I was also thinking of giving a talk on this, but I thought, let me ask Divya. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
You have done so nicely connecting the various things which come under the broad umbrella of social cost and benefit. I couldn't even think of connecting them to social cost and benefit. So you have done wonderfully.
Thank you, sir.
I hope this talk will be very useful for all of you. And as usual, we have very good learners here. I cannot say them students. I am learning from them also. Abha and Swadesh and Vijay and all, they're all Manish. Many of them, they'll be making all lectures very exciting and good. I think Divya, once again I invite you to think of some more unique and come back again.
Anytime, sir. Anytime.
Thank you, Divya, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
We have another meeting very soon.
Thank you, ma'am. If possible, arrange another lecture with Divya.
I'll request her. I'll request her.
I'm happy to continue this conversation. I learned a lot from you as well, all of you. I mean, as I told you, I'm I'm a researcher, I'm a beginner, but you're all very experienced, and I know that and some of you are working in the field.
Yeah.
I personally
Many
do,
case studies
Swatish.
you shared. It's
Exactly. So
yeah,
no, but
it
I
is.
also learned from you, so I'm happy anytime. Sahu sir, do
We
feel free
all
to.
we are a big team now. They are also